circulation.
Which means, inevitably, someone is going to lose the game. Someone is going to go bankrupt, and that has nothing whatsoever to do with the quality of the goods and services or the efficiency of the business. Nothing at all.
Everybody in the economy is vying with everyone else to avoid defaulting on their loans to the banks. And the only way they can do that is by competing with one another for an inadequate supply. So it's like a game of musical chairs. It assures that there must be some losers, regardless of how competent they are in conducting their business.
The money we get when we receive a loan is called principal. Our debt, however, is not discharged when we repay the principal. Bank loans are all made on the condition that people pay both the principal and the interest the bank charges. However, money can only be issued as principal. No one creates the interest, so the amount of debt owed is actually far greater than the amount of money there is to repay it. When a dollar is loaned into the economy, it begins a loop. Joe the farmer gets a loan from the bank and pays Tom for fixing his tractor. Tom pays Jane for bread at the local bakery, and Jane in turn buys the wheat from Joe, who can now repay the loan. The problem is, Joe owes the bank interest on top of the principal. In order to avoid losing his property to the bank, Joe must go find other money making its own loop in the economy. He can now repay his loan with the interest, but the people in that loop are left without their money. They still need money to facilitate their exchanges, and to repay the loan that issued the money they had been using. The only place they can get it is from other such debt loops. Since all money has an interest price tag attached, there will never be enough money to repay all the debt owed to banks. Therefore, some people will always have to go bankrupt, or have their property repossessed by the bank.
It's crazy. Sometimes it worries me because, what if there was like a collective understanding about how phony the money is when it comes down to it? What would people do? Would they riot in the streets?
Who's propagating the illusion behind the money? That just pisses me off, actually.
Whenever it rains, the trees direct a certain amount of the rainfall to the bark, and this bark is set up in these elaborate patterns to direct rain all the way around the tree.
Wow, really?
Yep. And in these crevices where bugs and ants and other critters live, you get a lot of exoskeletons that are shed in here. That then is dissolved by the rainwater. It runs down and it carries the phosphate from the bugs and the manure of bugs down into this. All of this organic material at the base here is what feeds the tree. So it's like a constant recycling of the material of life back into life.
Well, I don't think economics are related only to humans at all. It's very easy to see nature as an economy. Nature creates value constantly for the benefit of all its membership, and that's what I think economics are really all about.
Here you have a kind of banking of resources, that every element in this forest contributes to. So it's more like a community of contributors, and you take what you need as you need it. So There's like a bank, like at the bottom of that fir tree. There's this bank of resources, and it's available to the tree, it's available to fungi, to the earthworm, to termites, to whatever comes along and needs it. And each time someone takes something, they generally contribute something. There isn't that kind of profit motive or interest or any of that in natural systems. It really isn't necessary to have more than you need, unless somehow you're acculturated to that belief system. So there's a kind of scarcity boogie bear in human culture that always has us feeling as if there isn't enough or there's not going to be enough. So we've got to gather as much as we can and store it where no one can get to it and steal it from us or rob us or whatever. And then it doesn't really matter if we even use it.
Most people's experience with money is that money is scarce. And in today's monetary system, it is scarce.
These cultural lies on which our relationship with money rests and is rooted is really governed almost completely by the most insidious and tragic lie, which I believe is the lie of scarcity.
Even the Federal Reserve publications claim that what gives money its value is its scarcity. And this is false. It's not the scarcity that gives money its value. When we're talking about credit money, what gives it value is its ability to requisition whatever you want or need from the marketplace.
We actually swim in a set of unexamined, unconscious beliefs. And we look out into the world and we just fear that there's not enough to go around without any evidence, really. And then we make that true.
The domination model artificially creates scarcity. And that scarcity is one of the ways that the system actually maintains itself. Not only material scarcity, emotional and yes, spiritual scarcity.
What does it mean to have enough money? I guess you always want a little more.
There's not enough time. There's not enough money. There's not enough sleep. So it's a constant battle with there's not enough. We don't have enough. It's not enough. I'm not enough. And that is a mindset. It's an unconscious, unexamined mindset that creates distorted behaviors that are inconsistent with who we are.
The same thing that keeps a rich person from giving is the same thing that keeps a poor person from making. It's that conditioned way of thinking and seeing that we have to really begin to address. Those who consider themselves poor in this country are not poor. I think it's this scarcity mentality. I think it's a belief system that we all carry.
And that there's not enough belief system has a second part to it. There's not enough to go around, and someone somewhere is going to be left out. And that inevitable fear or certainty that there's not enough to go around and someone somewhere is going to be left out is actually at the base of our political understanding of the world, our systems of governance, our educational system. It's even at the heart of religion.
Of course there are scarcities that happen naturally. There's a disaster, there's a flood, all kinds of things can happen. But here you have a system that artificially creates scarcity so that then you get people who really are fighting for the spoils, and since there's so much control from up on top, it is a way of maintaining the disunity and the confusion of those on bottom.
What it is emasculated men. And what do men do when they're emasculated? They compensate with hypermasculinity. When you leave, particularly men, with no options, they get violent and they get destructive. I don't care where you're talking about. Go to Russia. What do you think the Russian gangs are? Go to Northern Ireland. Go anywhere in the world, these devastating dynamics are engineered.
So our experience of money as being scarce is an artifact of the money system. In a properly run monetary system, there will be no scarcity of money.
There's not enough to go around and someone somewhere is always going to be left out gives us this very difficult and unfortunate permission to leave people out. Because if someone's always going to be left out, then it's your job and my job to accumulate more than we possibly could ever use or need, to distance ourselves from ever being one of those poor people who gets left out.
At the point of view of the corporation, getting more and more and more, that is driven in part by greed, in part by the dynamic of trying to get profits, capitalism, but it's also driven by fear. Because if you don't do it, if you can't expand faster than the next corporation, they will get research money, and they will get marketing money, and they will beat you and may drive you out of the game.
You're not quite as efficient in this plant as you ought to be by our calculations. This is the banker speaking. And so therefore, we're going to either raise the cost of your credit and drive you to do bad things to your workers or to your community or to the environment in order to boost that return and boost your stock price. And we will lend to you under those terms only.
The nice way of saying it is nice guys finish last. If you're callous to the effects on others, you have a potential to rise. The odds are that you can compete your way up. If you care and are socially concerned about others, you're at a tremendous disadvantage. So I think the competitive dynamic that we have does sort of weed out a set of people for success. But I would say that what it weeds out for success is not competence, not creativity, not intelligence, but callousness far more often.
Well, I think if you look at how economies actually function, they function with both competition and cooperation. And so I think both can coexist. We have probably leaned more toward competition, and I think we could use more cooperation. But I think either one in its extreme can be dysfunctional.
Competition does have its place in urging us to our highest level of performance and fulfillment. But health is dependent on cooperation. We don't have the liver competing with the heart for blood and for nutrients. There is this inherent cooperation that leads to the health of the entire entity.
The nature to which people are able to be social, civilized, sympathetic, is quite amazing, and it's in contradiction to the nature of the money.
It's interesting that anybody, whether you're a man or a woman, whether you're aggressive naturally or very sweet and cooperative naturally, if you're going to have to make the money to live, I make you a prediction. You're going to have to fight for it. You're going to have to compete for it. Is that in nature out there? Is that the world that is that way? Or is it the money system that's between us and the world that is that way? I make the second claim.
A lot of diversity here. We're starting to see a whole different array of plants come into being. So there's some lupins here. There's some strawberry, small wild strawberry. This broom with the yellow blooms on it. This is a nitrogen fixer and is stabilizing these slopes. And decomposters here, they're harvesting that broom.
So what are these ants doing for the whole situation?
Well, basically they're breaking carbon down. They're taking carbon, gathering it together, and breaking it down. You got a great part of the Umbellifera family. This is yarrow. They're deep-rooted, so they bring a lot of minerals up from the parent material. They go below this sand and dig into more than silica to bring up things to the surface that'll nourish these other plants. So you got a lot of complexity here. A lot of plants cooperating with each other to try and create an ecosystem that stabilizes this shifting sand surface here.
Ecosystems are based much more on cooperation than they are on competition. We tend to deify cutthroat competition. And there is some competition in nature, but there's much more cooperation.
Species move from competition to cooperation because they discover the economic value of cooperating. It is cheaper, more efficient. All you have to do is look at our Pentagon budget and see that a tiny fraction of it would really develop countries that we've been leveling instead. Very much more cost effective to make friends of them than it is to keep them as enemies.
We have 8 billion people on the planet. There's 1 billion of those that are happy to work but can't. There are no jobs for them.
Some would argue that these people are unemployed because they lack skills or because they don't want to work, and that may be true in a few cases, but in the vast majority, that's not the reason why they're impoverished. The reason why they're impoverished is because you have this scarcity of money.
The first question I ask is, am I going to be stuck being a janitor forever? And they were like, oh no, there's all kinds of chance for advancement. You could go to calling. We've got data entry. You've got all kinds of computer skills. And then 4 months passed and I addressed it again and got a different story. It was like I had no value. My self-esteem was going down because I can do more than just clean bingo tables and clean toilets.
If you have an economy which is generating only a limited number of good jobs, are you surprised that parents feel it's really important to teach their kids how to compete on every level? They want their kids to get those jobs. You know, another kind of response would be to get together and say, hey, wait a second, there's a problem with the structure here. But, you know, we have a very individualistic response to the problem.
At the time of the Civil War in the United States, which is a very interesting turning point, midway in the Industrial Revolution, industrial rebuilding of the United States, slavery in the South was obviously condemned, but the counter-argument was something they called wage slavery. And what did that mean? It meant that you had no protection. You could be fired at will. Without a job, you could be thrown out on the street, and you were a wage slave was the term.
13th Amendment, which says you cannot treat a human being as a commodity for buying and selling. And the new economics is you can no longer buy or sell labor, but you can rent it. So the wage is you're renting somebody.
The word job was invented in the industrial age in England. It didn't exist before. And it describes a pile of things that one does for money. Work is a very, very old concept. And work is something you do because you're passionate about, or because you're good at it, or because that's what you love doing. A job is specifically something you do for pay. Pay in national money, to be precise.
Tell me, why are you interested in this job? I need a steady job, Mr. Wiley, with a chance to go places.
People like Woodrow Wilson and Abraham Lincoln said that if America became that sort of society, the society in which everyone became, the vast majority became wage laborers, or wage slavery as they used to call it, we would lose the freedoms that made America great.
If you, say, were in such conditions of duress, that you just couldn't survive except by being a slave, you might sign a contract that says, okay, I'll be your slave. That's by your own free will. I mean, are we going to take that seriously? Under some pathological assumptions, I suppose.
We live in an economy which takes 80% of each new generation and educates that 80% to obey orders and to endure boredom, and stifles their creativity, and stifles their capacities, and curtails them. They're systematically crushed by a system which does what? Which fills slots. And 80% of the slots need people who just do rote, tedious, repetitive labor, at least at work, and therefore are acclimated to doing that.
Most of my jobs I've never really liked. I've never said, this is great. I can't believe I'm getting paid to do this.
Yeah, there was a job I really, really despised, but the money was really good.
It wasn't the job that I wanted, and my daily life and my work experience was just not making me happy.
You could say, you know what, this is a terrible job. I don't want to do it. It's a free market. You have total choice to not show up under these terrible conditions. At the same time, if you don't, little problem here, you're not going to eat, and your family isn't going to eat. And that's why people do it.
Yeah, I really hated that job. I think many of us nowadays feel the way Charlie Chaplin role modeled long ago, like cogs in wheels, that we're stuck in the machinery of our economy, that we have very little choice. We have to work a 9-to-5 job and watch a little TV and go to bed and do it all over again.
I want to have a more rewarding experience, I guess, with life, and based not just to make money and to say, oh, this year I made 10,000 more than last year.
I think that this whole idea of the middle class in this country is ridiculous. There is no middle class. There's no such thing as that. They're the working poor too, because their whole lifestyle is financed to death. They have the big, beautiful house, the 2 lovely cars, they're putting their kids through college. But if they get fired from their job, all of that stuff is over.
I've always been kind of a cynical person, so I guess to me, doing jobs to just support yourself is just pretty much what life is about.
It's that we do the work we do so often simply for the money. Now, since we're all chasing this money around, it utterly patterns our society.
So hardly realizing it, they come into their purchasing stage and are off on a wild, non-stop ride. It's a happy-go-spending world, reflected in the windows of the suburban shopping centers where they go to buy.
I claim there's enough work in the world for everybody, forever. But if you start to have to pay for it with a national money that's scarce, that's making it work into a job, that is going to be another question. Because someone has to borrow that money in order to pay you.
As we get rid of more and more and more jobs, we may have to get to a point where we redefine the meaning of work. And you're going to have to find other ways for people to support themselves.
Work, there's an infinity of things we can do. We can make every city, every garden, every house a paradise. There's an infinity amount of things to be done to reach there. Don't expect to be paid for it in national money. Don't get that idea. So we have to find another way, what people can do in a post-industrial age.
One of the things about local currency, I think that a lot of people are embracing it because they're starting to understand more about our federal economic system. Federal reserve notes don't necessarily serve the best interest of local communities, and local currency can help tip the scales back into that mindset.
For some people, if they have river hours and they don't have federal money, we felt like, well, that's fine, we will take them. And it works for us because we have employees here who are willing to be paid in river hours. My name is Mark England, and I'm a registered nurse, and I'm the Director of Clinical Services here at La Clinica. We're not a free clinic, we expect payment, but we also work with people because we understand that people also need to buy food and shelter and other things to keep themselves alive as well.
We don't seek to replace federal money in our communities at all. We are hoping to facilitate more exchange beyond what's possible with federal dollars. It's another kind of faith and another kind of currency, and it's faith in your neighbors, it's faith in local business, it's faith in your region and what it can offer you, and that there is true wealth there to be had.
Not many of us remember that this country was built on decentralized issue of currency. By and large, what it meant was that the various regions of the United States could develop in a decentralized way according to the resources and the skills that they had in a region. And that's what created the great diversity and economic wealth of this country.
Complementary currency, in my definition, is an agreement in a community to use something, just about anything that they can agree on, as a medium of exchange. That's other than national conventional money. The first thing that one has to understand about complementary currencies is that there are as many different rules that you can want to invent. In national money, there's only one. Okay, that's basically the same worldwide. In complementary currencies, different communities agree on different rules. It is complementary because they do not replace national money.
A local currency is something that is issued at the time that it's backed by goods and services in our community. And when people advertise in the River Hours Trade Directory, they actually sign a commitment